Alright guys, listen up. Why remake Crash Bash when you can remake Crash Boom Bang? Well, CTR nitro-fueled has been reported to have the best launch month in the franchise history, and I did not expect that for a spin-off game. Do I think that it will eventually sell 10 million units like the Insane Trilogy did? Yeah. When Crash Bash becomes a good game. But now we're left here in a weird and slightly controversial state. What will the next Crash Bandicoot game be? And what would I want it to be? Well, first I'm going to go over the possibilities and what other people would like to see, then go over my verdict. Oh wait, opinions nowadays are illegal. And there's no need to be offended by what I'm going to say. I'm going to leave the comment section as an open discussion to let me and everyone else know what you'd like to see next for Crash. Let's discuss our opinions civilly. Or you can just be like that bloke on Twitter who blocks absolutely everyone who has a differing opinion than them about Crash Bash. Yep, very mature, mate. Okay, the first possibility, and one that many people have been discussing, is another remake. And this game in particular happens to be the only Crash game on the PlayStation 1 that hasn't been remade. Crash Bash. Me personally, I think a Crash Bash remake wouldn't work, and I would not like to see it. I like Crash Bash, don't get the wrong idea here. The game's just not that good. It's not bad, but at the same time, the critical and commercial response wasn't even near the standard that the original trilogy and CTR had for the time. Crash 1 pretty much needed a remake. That game was awfully clunky, and the save system was absolutely broken, and the Insane Trilogy fixed that, even though the hitboxes were as ridiculous as this cutscene.
Hold it. Stop. Don't shoot.
Crash 2, Warped, and Team Racing, however, deserved remakes, but it wasn't needed. We can, however, be grateful that now we have them as they're greater than ever. Bash didn't have that charm, that replayability, that addictiveness that the first 4 Crash games had. Let's be real here, Crash Bash is literally just 7 mini-games rehashed over and over and over again. With that aspect, I don't think a remake of this game should even be considered. And if you really like Crash Bash, there's nothing wrong with that. I like it, sort of, but I can still recognize the issues with the game. And it didn't do the same thing where CTR rivaled Mario Kart greatly back then, but Bash didn't rival Mario Party in the slightest. And people would argue that if they did something similar to what nitro-fueled did to CTR, as in add more characters, more game modes, and improve the stuff that needed improving, it would be great to remake it. Even with that, I truly believe focus should be put into something other than this. Something fresh would benefit the publishers, developers, and consumers much more. A Crash Bash remake, honestly, the only people who would benefit is the nostalgia cravers for that game. And am I one of them? Sort of. It was the 3rd Crash game I've ever played. But nostalgia alone isn't something that warrants a remake. The game's initial response needs to be really good, like Rascal Racers. But Crash Bash fans, it's not all doom and gloom. I won't dismiss Crash Bash, however. I would like to mention some other things relating to it. I've heard a lot of people talking about a Crash Bash remake as a side mode to a new game, and maybe that would work. But we have to remember here, Bash is a pretty big game as a side mode alone. Maybe if adventure mode were cut and having all the arcade stuff, yeah, I guess that would work. It'd be a neat secondary focus on something bigger. You'll please basically all Crash fans with a new game, but you will also please the people wanting Crash Bash. Something else relating to Crash Bash that I would like to see, not for the next Crash game, but down the line, is a completely new Crash Party game, with of course some throwbacks to Bash, like similar levels, etc. The reception of Bash wasn't all that amazing, so why not have a completely fresh take on a new party game down the line? I would actually really like that. I would also really like Garfield and CTR, but it doesn't look like that's gonna happen. Another possibility for the next Crash game is, well, another game's remake, and that's Crash Boom Bang, and that is Crash Twinsanity. This one can also be controversial. I haven't played Twinsanity in many years, but a quote from myself in another video got a negative response, and that quote was, "Crash Twinsanity does not deserve a remake." And I still stand by that point. Let me fucking explain the cock jockeys. At least I can go into detail here on why I believe that. Just like Crash Bash, the game's critical and commercial success wasn't even close to the first 4. And don't say I'm a Naughty Dog fanboy, because that's not the case. I've said it before, even though I think Crash 2, 3, and Team Racing are the best Crash games, I think Crash Nitro Kart is one of the best entries in the Crash series as well. And hell, I kinda like Titans. Fight me. Listen, I remember loving Twinsanity as well, and there's nothing wrong with that. The game was fun, it had a new style of platforming for the series, the story wasn't half bad, the game was really funny, and holds one of the greatest lines in Crash history.
Wrath of Cortex didn't do as well as we'd hoped, and... Fish?
But this game wasn't exactly the holy grail of the Crash series either. Yes, definitely the best platformer post Naughty Dog, even though there wasn't a lot of them, but a huge thing the game suffers from is that it's a mess. The game is lagging in a lot of sections, glitchy in nearly all sections, there's missing audio, a load of cut content, the game isn't optimized, and it runs like ass. An argument people make for this is that a remake would fix all these issues and it can be the game it was once supposed to be. But my counter argument is this: why do you think older games get remade? I know the reason. This counter argument will apply for Crash Bash as well, and I'm going to use Resident Evil and that remake as an example. The 2002 Resident Evil remake / 2015 Resident Evil Remake remaster remake, remaster, is not only one of the best horror games ever made, not only one of the best remakes ever made, but I would argue one of the best games ever made. And you know what? The original was too. The game aged awfully quickly with the sequel coming out and Silent Hill coming into the horror game scene shortly after. It quickly became one of the best games ever made to one of the most hilarious, clunky, and stupid. This is why the game was remade. Capcom wanted the qualities that the original initially had to be the same to that day, so the Resident Evil remake still has those qualities. It's scary, atmospheric, immersive, and I know it doesn't have the infamous
Jill sandwich.
You're right.
But even in 2019, this game is praised as much as it was back in 2002. Same thing with Crash 1. Back in the day, it was an enormous hit and might be one of the reasons why the PlayStation became what it is today. But the game aged and lost a lot of its qualities, so it was remade to once again bring back those qualities. The same thing should apply for Bash and Twinsanity. If those games weren't met with great reception and still doesn't hold up in a lot of aspects, it doesn't deserve a remake. And yeah, Twinsanity does have the potential to be better, I will admit that. Not as good as the original trilogy, but it still doesn't warrant the game to deserve a remake. Wrath of Cortex sold more and had a similar initial response to Twinsanity, so should that get remade? Of course not. That game was one of the most mediocre pieces of turd I've ever seen. I hope I convinced some of you on why any other Crash game shouldn't get remade. They didn't have those qualities or a good initial response like the first 4 Crash games had. Well, except, you know, Crash Purple, remake that. So what else is there for the next Crash game? Well, the next Crash game. It might sound weird to say this, but the newest Crash game, not including remakes, was Crash Mind Over Mutant. Not only was that a horrible game, but that came out in 2008, 11 years ago. Crash was in a goddamn purgatory for 9 years until Insane came out. Well, unless you count Skylanders, where he spoke, and you know how everyone feels about Crash speaking.
Hi, I'm Crash Bandicoot, the super marsupial, the wonder from down under.
Fucking kill it. So yeah, Crash hasn't had a fully fledged new entry into the series for a long time. A new game also seems to be the universally accepted answer to the next Crash game after CTR. And who the hell knows what a new game could bring? Are they going to take a new approach to the story after Crash 3, or maybe make a new game with the stories of Wrath of Cortex and Twinsanity? The possibilities are nearly endless. That hypes me up. I can't wait to see what Activision has in store for the next entry, because I honestly can't recall once me being hyped for a new Crash game, not a remake. So those are the possibilities for the next Crash game. But what do I think? Well, I think my point of view has become pretty obvious throughout the duration of the video. I want to see Mind Over Mutant remade. I would love to see something new. But specifically, I would like to see a Crash game where the gameplay style combines both the original trilogy's progression style with Twinsanity's 3D open world-esque style. While I love the linear style the trilogy had, it's a bit outdated. I believe a new Crash game should have some of that, but a lot of 3D open world stuff. I think this would please most Crash fans out there. Maybe something similar to Super Mario Odyssey. That modern open world adventure platformer style would suit Crash. But in terms of story, I want it to continue on from Crash 3 or Team Racing if that's considered canon. I would love to have characters like Crash Bandicoot return as the villain and become the good guy again, kind of reimagining the story from Wrath of Cortex, but not at the same time. The Crash series has revived itself, so I want to see a new take on the events after Crash 3. I want it to be a series again, not a remake purgatory. But what do you think? What would you like to see for the next entry of Crash? Let me know in the comments. I want to have some discussion. I hope you understand why I don't think Crash Bash, Twinsanity, and any other Crash game deserves remakes. If Crash games keep getting remade, it's a slippery slope, and I'm just afraid that one of my favorite gaming series could end up in the dirt again if the wrong games get made, or remade as a matter of fact. And I understand people's nostalgia, but while that was a key factor into Insane and nitro-fueled success, it wouldn't work in the same way for games that had a lot worse reception. I think with all these remakes, the Crash fans have been spoiled, and I completely understand this. We just want more and more, and our nostalgia needs to feed on more remakes, but we need to be realistic here. The Crash games that needed or deserved remakes got remakes. We shouldn't get any more for the series' own good. We can't let Crash fail again. So instead of focusing on remaking, Activision and whoever's developing Crash from now on needs to focus on making. Let's have some creativity. Something fresh. Hashtag no more Crash remakes. See you later.